where having your team number comes into play. We're going to open up the breakout rooms in just a moment, and you will complete the same assessment in a team. Now, I'm sharing the link to the team readiness assurance test. If you would kind of copy and paste that, you can open up the survey. Oh, don't start to take it until you're in your teams, though. There's another QR code for the team readiness assurance test if you'd like to scan the QR code. So you can pull up the survey. Don't move forward with it, though, until you're in your teams. So what we're going to do next is open up some breakout rooms and shuttle you all into those. So I need to create 17 breakout rooms, and we will assign manually and create. All right, so what you'll notice is that the breakout rooms I'm currently opening, and I'm assigning folks to. And so in just a moment, you're going to see a link to join the breakout room, and we just ask that you click join breakout room. And once you do, you'll have instructions on how to complete the team readiness assurance process. And so if you would just give me a minute as I sift through each of these. It takes about a minute or two for me to get through all 17 teams. If you haven't done so already, be sure to copy the link, because once you go to your breakout rooms, you won't be able to see it. Almost there. All right. So all teams are now assigned. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and you'll be asked to go into them. So go into your breakout rooms, complete the assessment, and let's plan to be back here by about 8:55, somewhere between 8:55 and 9. Daniel and Kathleen, you all are my heroes. You all were machines. And so there's a couple people that still are here with us in the main room. I know, let's see here, Sandeep's staying with us. Christian, if you'll have to click accept to go into the breakout room. If you're having any issues, let me know. Hi, Jing, same for you. If you're having any issues, let me know. Whoever QXTW is, I tried to message you in the chat. I don't know your name to assign you to a room. If you could let me know, I'll be able to shuttle you there.
I'm pleased with the turnout. I think it's like almost 100 people that are here.
I agree.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous about it. Because if like half the people showed up, the rooms were going to be too small. But then if a lot more showed up, it was going to be scrambling to make new ones. So it worked out.
Yeah. It was good that we kind of were doing the introduction for a few minutes, a lot of people on. That one really smooth.
So I think when I do my breakout sessions, then I'll just have the participants select the room they've already been assigned to, correct? I think that would work.
I think so. I think that makes the most sense.
Okay.
And that way, you know, they've already worked with the people and know them a little bit. And yeah, I think it would be good.
Definitely. I think there'll be more engagement if they are comfortable with the people they're working with. Yeah.
Do we know who the QXTW8293 is?
No, feel free to speak up. We can assign you, but if I don't hear anything, I don't know what to really do.
Kathleen, you were so quick assigning those names. I went to assign someone and then I would see Kathleen already switched it. I was like, man, she's too quick.
Ditto back to you though, Daniel. Like they were jumping the names.
Right, yeah. It was so hard to try and pick someone because they kept jumping.
Hi, Dr. Noel. For the, hey, how's it going?
Hi.
For the TRAT link, it looks like it was the IRAT link. Is it the same thing?
No, I sent a new one for the TRAT. I sent it in the chat box.
I see that one, but it sent me to the IRAT, and same for the
I'm
other
going to
people
send
in my
it here
team.
again. Oh, I hope I didn't screw that up. Okay, let me send a broadcast message.
Okay.
I might have to, yeah, go ahead and use that one, Clinton.
Okay.
Let me see if folks are distribution survey. Data and analysis. Did you guys already finish Team 10? Perfect. Did it take you to the TRAT or the IRAT?
The TRAT.
Okay, it had you select your team and everything? Okay.
Oh, wait a second.
So use the link. Sorry, so I'm going to paste a new link here. Some had the IRAT link. So if you would, just use that link and put in your team and your answers again, if you would.
Gotcha. All right, Team 10, I could do this for us.
Sorry for the confusion.
We believe in you.
Team 13, it looks like you all are done. I want to make sure you use the right link. Did you have the TRAT link or the IRAT link?
Honestly, I just used the link that you put in the chat at like 8:43.
Did it have you put in your team number?
It did not.
If you would, since we have a few minutes, could you use the link that I just put in the chat box and just resubmit your answers on that? You can keep all the answers the same, but just resubmit it on that one if you would. Team 5, I see you all are back here. I think there was some confusion, same with Team 7, on which link to use. If when you filled out the link, it did not ask you for your team number, if you would just use this fresh link that is in the chat box and just input your answers again, that would help me out tremendously.
I think ours did we input our team 5.
Good. Okay. If you put in your team, then we're all good.
Okay, great.
Cecilia, you all good?
Yep. All
Okay.
good.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Team 10, we did well, by the way. Yay.
Yeah, you're supposed to get the immediate feedback for the TRAT. So for others in Team 10, it tells you if you got it right or wrong. So
All right, for team 13, I submitted our answers again. We got 4 out of 5.
for those of you back in the main room, I sent a message out to the breakout rooms to have everything wrapped up and back here by 9. So a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. If anyone's joined us back in the main room, if your team did not get prompted to enter your team assignment, you may have had the wrong link. And so the correct link is here in the chat now. If you did get asked your team number and you selected that, then you're all good to go. If you didn't, if you could just retake it quickly on behalf of your team using that link, that would be helpful. All right, so I've closed the breakout rooms and folks will have a minute to come back here in the main room, and then we're going to go over the results of the IRAT and TRAT, clarify a few concepts, and then we'll move along. All right, it looks like we've got everyone, I think. Just a couple more people trickling in. So you all have now gone through the readiness assurance process. And so I'll share my screen again, and I want to go over some of the results, and we will go from there. So first things first, if you've not figured this out, maybe you didn't do the pre-reading because you're busy, I get it. Maybe you didn't do it because you didn't realize you had to. Team-based learning is a very structured way of kind of going through the learning process. And it really starts with the readiness process, which is the pre-class work that was assigned to you all. And then the second component of that is the readiness assurance process, which as you work through on the assessment is really designed to hold students accountable and ensure that they come to class prepared. And so after the readiness assurance test, we typically do what's called a clarifying discussion. And so we're going to walk through some of the commonly missed questions and the results from the questions and make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you didn't know, you were doing the survey in Qualtrics. Doing it in Qualtrics allows me to kind of see in real time how folks are doing and engage accordingly. So what I'm showing you here, hopefully you can see it, is the results from the individual readiness assurance test. And the average score was about a 60%. Which is actually, honestly, we shoot for about 70% for the IRAT. And so you all are right where we would expect to be, especially for busy practitioners who maybe didn't have time to do the pre-readings. A few people got all 5 of the questions right. A few people got none. I want to point out each question and just highlight a couple of the ones that were commonly missed. So I'm going to scroll down to a particular one. To the following is primary purpose. Good. So which of the following is the primary purpose of the readiness assurance test? And so most people, it's loading up here, most people got this right, but I just want to reiterate the significance of the readiness assurance process. When we're talking about our PharmD students, this is really what's holding them accountable for doing the pre-class materials and coming into class prepared. So I just wanted to point that out. That was one that a lot of people missed that is worth noting. Let's see how y'all did on the last couple. So that one's one we need to clarify, and that one. All right, so I'm going to switch gears and show you the team readiness assurance test. And so that way you can see the difference. And then I'm going to call on some teams to kind of talk about how they arrived at the answer they did. The average was about 75% on the team readiness test. Again, compared to about 60%. In the classroom, typically the team readiness assurance test has an average of about 90–95%. So typically there's pretty dramatic increase in how folks do. So I'm going to skip over this first question, which really just talks about the cycle. And most of you all got this. Before class, pre-class materials. During class, we have the readiness assurance test, the clarifying discussion, which is what we're doing now, and then the application exercises that follow. All right, so I'm going to call on someone from Team 5. Anyone can speak. I just want to ask that you unmute yourself. If you can show your video, you can. But someone from Team 5, I'd like you all to share a little bit about why, for this particular question, it's important that teams stay in the same, or students stay in the same team for the whole course. Anyone from Team 5? Michelle, I can see you on my screen, or at least your name. So maybe you can speak up, or someone else from Team 5.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I think it's important because if you can like form connections, you can work with your team, you kind of understand your learning style, and you get to at the end, you also and this is kind of leading into another question, you do peer evaluation. So I think, it's important to be with the same team to kind of form that camaraderie.
Yeah, and as much as we're trying to do a mock TBL session here, it's really suboptimal in a lot of ways. I don't know, did you know anyone in your team before you started?
Yeah, two of us are all in the same program. So
okay, great. So you had some camaraderie there, but you can imagine that if you knew no one, who are you going to decide who's the team leader and things like that? That takes time to really develop that camaraderie. Awesome. Thanks for answering, Michelle. Anyone else have thoughts on why it's important to stay in the same team for the entire course?
Hey, Zach.
Yeah.
It's me. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think it can help develop when people get comfortable with their individual team members. It might get somebody who once didn't feel comfortable serving as a leader to kind of develop those skills and maybe speak up a little bit more.
Absolutely. I love that comment, Kristen. And what you're getting at is a lot of interpersonal skills and quote unquote soft skills or non-cognitive abilities. And that is absolutely one of the biggest benefits of TBL, at least in my mind, is that we get many of these intangible benefits beyond grades, beyond academic performance. We get these intangible things that contribute towards professionalism and things like that are so important. Thanks, Kristen. Awesome. Any other comments? I will say that one of the goals is that over the term of the course, teams would become what we call high functioning. And by that, we just mean that they're operating very efficiently. They work together well. And we experience this in our own teams, right? Whether it's a medical team that we work on or with our pharmacy colleagues, the more we work together and we learn each other's strengths, the better we can operate. And so that's one of the goals with TBL. So you guys did a good job on this question, particularly on the team readiness assessment. So kudos to you all. Foundational concepts. So I'm going to call on team 14. Could someone from team 14 maybe walk me through a little bit of your team's thought process on the primary purpose of the readiness assurance test?
So in our little group discussion, we were kind of running out of time by the end of it, but when we were talking about it, because we spent a lot of time talking about the other ones, but I wasn't exactly sure if these particularly fell into what I really thought the primary purpose of the readiness assurance test was, because really what I had thought is that it's in order to make sure that, I guess, they understand some of the concepts and that the lecturer or the facilitator can fill in the gaps in the knowledge for where there is some lapse in what they were reading. But we definitely thought the most applicable one was to ensure students were prepared for in-class activities, because if they weren't prepared, then there would be really no facilitation. They wouldn't be able to learn from any of their mistakes. They wouldn't be able to actually apply anything that they read beforehand. So it was the most applicable one, but it wasn't the one that I thought was exactly the best purpose in at least my mind.
Yeah. And so I think that's a great point. So your team discussed what as the primary purpose, and I get that you all picked that first one there, which is the most correct answer here. But just so we're clear, because I think it's a good point to make, what did you all think really the primary purpose is?
At least in my mind, it was really so that facilitators could fill in the gaps in the knowledge and actually cover the most important concepts that were taken away from the pre-reading, so that they understood the most important material.
Yeah, and I would argue that's certainly a purpose, and I think we can quibble about whether it's the primary purpose or not. But I think your point is absolutely valid. That it is to help us identify those gaps in knowledge. I totally agree. Anyone from Team 7? Can you explain maybe why this third option is not the best answer? So the third option says to assess students' ability to apply foundational concepts to case-based scenarios. Any idea, Team 7, why that one's probably not the best option? I see. So Shakina, your name is on my screen. Do you want to speak up for your team?
Zach, I can speak up if no one else is there. So I think when applying it to like case-based scenarios, that's sort of like a higher level thought process. And I think the goal, like really the pre-readings, is just to get some foundational knowledge. So I just think that wouldn't quite apply at that point in the learning discussion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So a few teams selected this, but it's important to recognize that initial assurance test is really the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy, if you will. Case-based scenarios are really for the application activity. So Ricky, you're spot on. Thanks for sharing, man. All right. So this one stumps some people. Which of the following is true about 4S application activity? So I'm going to call on team 3. Team 3, can you maybe walk us through your team's thought process on this question and how you arrived at your answer?
It's very ironic because this is the question that we got wrong.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. I just guessed. But I'm also interested in hearing your thought process, even if you got it wrong. That's okay. That's the point of this, is to talk through it.
Yeah, we narrowed down our selection to individuals should share their responses with the class and cases should involve real world problems. And we were going off of personal experiences that we've had so far. So we chose the individuals should share their responses with the class because we were thinking usually indicated or have someone, a team leader, share for that class on the behalf of your group. But we also were saying it's very important that the cases that we're working on, we're applying it to real world problems so that we know how to apply that if we see that come up. So it's the correct answer.
Yeah, so, you know, when I look at this in hindsight, and this would be a great question to appeal if we were doing an appeals process, I put individuals should share their responses with the class, as in every, you know, all 100 of you would share your responses, as opposed to the team sharing their responses, an individual from the team sharing it on behalf of everyone. But what you're saying is exactly right. An individual from a team is going to share the responses. It's just on behalf of the team. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we couldn't figure out if that's exactly what that meant or not. So
they couldn't read my mind. If there is an appeals, you all should totally appeal that to get it right. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Did anyone who selected cases must be open-ended questions? Could I ask one of the 3 teams that selected that answer option to share? I don't think it'll tell me, unfortunately.
So this is team 2. We chose the open-ended questions option. So we went back and forth in kind of our test taking skills of must versus the word should used in the right answer. But essentially we chose that one because open-ended questions are more likely to spur discussion both in the small groups and in the large group. And really those case-based scenarios help apply the concepts in a more interactive format. But ultimately, we agree that the right answer is the real world problems, because although case questions probably should include open-ended questions, I don't think they must.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is correct, and that they don't have to be open-ended. And I think there's this tendency to believe that if you're doing some sort of, you know, clinical application or case-based scenario, that, you know, it needs to be open-ended to promote higher order thinking. But it's actually pretty astounding how using some alternative methods can elicit kind of deeper thought than even an open-ended question. And that ultimately gets back to, you know, where is the learner at in the grand scheme of things? If you've got, let's say, a first-year pharmacy student who doesn't have a whole lot of background experience and knowledge to draw off of, you can ask them an open-ended question, but they don't have much to draw off of to think about some of the things that we might think about and that we want them to think about. And so framing it in a different way, maybe it's a rank order question, which you'll see during the 4S exercise, or maybe it's a way to kind of be more specific in what you want from them. Give me an exact drug, dose, frequency, etc. Those can be very helpful. It's not that you can't use open-ended questions, it's just you don't necessarily have to use them. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. That was great. All right. And the last one everyone got right, which I'm thrilled to see. This has grown to be one of my favorite parts about TBL is the peer evaluation process. And there's a lot of potential benefits from the peer evaluation, but I think the single most notable is that it really encourages peers to hold each other accountable. And so, there's no mandating attendance in my classes where I use TBL because students hold each other accountable for being there. There's kind of this, again, just this accountability to do better and to perform up to the team's standards. And so there's a lot of great literature on how to kind of use this peer evaluation process to help teams become more high functioning. But you suffice it to say, everyone got it right, and that was excellent. All right, so that kind of brings us to the close of the clarifying discussion. So we've gone through the readiness assurance process. We've clarified any kind of lingering gaps in knowledge. And so now the only thing left to do is the application activity, which takes up a bulk of the time. And so what we're going to do is transition back into our teams in just a moment. And I'm going to share another QR code. I'm going to share the right link this time so that you all are taken to the 4S application activities. And you're going to do those in your teams. It's going to take about 30 minutes. And the point is that you all talk through it, work through it to come up with the right answer. And then we're going to come back here at about 9:45 or 9:50 and discuss it in more detail. If you finish early, you're welcome to, take a break if you need to use the restroom, grab a bite to eat. But I suspect the activities will probably take you at least half of the 30 minutes. So with that, I don't need to cover that. So I'm copying and pasting the right link this time. Chat. All right. So there's the link to the 4S activity. Again, the QR code is up there. And I'm going to open up the breakout rooms again. Open all rooms. And by default, you all should go to your assigned breakout rooms. It looks like some folks that maybe joined late are showing up. I will work to assign you to a room so that way we can get you in there and working with others. Okay. If the breakout room has popped up, feel free to join. If it hasn't, it should in just a moment.
Zach, did you copy and paste the link in the chat box?
I did. Oh, you know what? It looks like it. Man, I am 0 for 2 right now. I sent it to an individual instead of everyone. Thank you, Bobby. All right. Can you see it now, Bobby?
Yep.
All right, thank you. So whoever P. Koski is, I've sent you to your breakout room. If you just accept it, you should be able to head in there. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm gonna pop into some of the breakout rooms in a few minutes and just see how people are doing. So if I disappear, that's why. Oh my gosh, you guys are already done. Nice. Well, I'm curious, anyone who's in the main room now, have you all used TBL previously in pharmacy school? Ricky did?
Yeah, we use it a little bit.
What pharmacy school did you go to?
University of Buffalo.
Okay, cool. Anyone else? Reed, you did? You're shaking your head?
Yeah, we had every semester of pharmacy school, we did like a team-based learning class.
Where did you go?
I went to Albany College of Pharmacy.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
I did it at my pharmacy school also. It was just one course, but it was kind of our like self-care and non-pharmacologic drug course. And we did the IRATs and TRATs like each class.
Cool, cool. Where did you go again?
I was at MUSC.
Yeah, okay, cool. Nabila, I think you were going to say something. I didn't mean to
Yeah, I was gonna say same with us. I'm an alumna, so obviously.
Yeah. Now, I'm trying to, so TBL, with our first year was last year. We didn't formally do it before that, but we kind of incorporated bits and pieces of it. So.
Yeah, I guess during pharmacotherapy and ASD when we did cases and cold calls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are similarities between TBL and some of the elements included there. Cool.
Hey, Dr. Noel, what time are we planning on resuming in this room, you think?
9:45. So you're welcome to grab something to eat, use the restroom, do whatever.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So I sent a message to the remainder in the breakout rooms that we'll be back and started by 9:47. So just a few more minutes to hang out and then we'll get started. All right, so the breakout rooms are closed and we should have everyone back here in the main room. And so I hope that the application activities went well. I know some of you are in between patient care and verifying orders and other things like that. So I appreciate you still doing your best to participate and be involved. So what we're going to do at this time is the simultaneous report. So each team has submitted their responses. And so now we're going to kind of walk through those responses and discuss a little bit about them, how we got to the right answer, or maybe not necessarily even the right answer, but how we got to your team's answer. And so the first question that I want us to start with is the rank order question. And before I dive into the question, I just want to point out that this is actually a really good exercise to promote higher order thinking without making it open-ended. And so if you recall during the readiness assurance test, we talked about that. Rank order is a really, really good way to do it because you force teams to talk about nuances that might make one better or worse than the other. And so my hope is that that's what you all did within your teams. Now, it looks like just based on what everyone has submitted that the most common top ranked answer, in other words, the one that would be best suited for team-based learning was the 16-week pharmacokinetic course. And so I want to call on, let's do team 16. Team 16, if you would maybe share a little bit about what you selected as your top answer choice and maybe what distinguished it from the others.
Yeah, I can go. So we selected that one, I think, if I recall correctly, as our top choice. And I think we were between that one and the, yeah, sorry, I'm trying to remember the options, the cardiovascular course. So I think when we were talking about it, the cards course was like sort of what we think about when we think of like our pharmacy classes, but the actual PK course mentioned, like it listed that there are cases and in-class case closures every 2 weeks. So we thought that sort of went beyond just like coming to class and taking an exam, whereas had like the cards course mentioned like rats and team-based learning activities, then that would have been a higher option also. So we ordered the PK first, and then the second option would have been the cards course.
Okay. And so let me ask you this in follow up. For the cards course, you know, it's listed as being lecture 3 times a week and 4 exams. Are there ways that team-based learning could be used to kind of transform that into a more active learning environment? And this doesn't have to be just you. Someone else from your team can answer too.
I think there's definitely potential to kind of, sorry, Matt, to flip that around, because we did talk about that, that's what we're used to. And we were kind of between putting one or the other as first, but I think just since the PK one was already there, but I think, you know, switching some pre-class different assignments and things like that, there's definitely so much potential for that cardiology course too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the cardiology course, it's kind of a more traditional lecture-based approach, but I would argue team-based learning could be used to transform it into something that involves more active learning. For what it's worth, I felt the pharmacokinetic course was probably best suited as well when I had it as ranked as one of the top ones too. So, all right, thanks for sharing. What about someone from Team 13? Team 13, do you want to share a little bit about one of the other options that you all picked and where you ranked it?
Yeah, so our team, I think we did the pharmacokinetic course as number 1, and then we did the medical marijuana as number 2, only because the medical marijuana doesn't really talk about kind of like, I guess, a discussion component, whereas the PK course talks about cases. And then we did put the compounding course as number 3, and then cards as number 4. Yep.
Okay. And so let's talk about the online course, the medical marijuana course, for a moment. So what do you think are some challenges to implementing TBL in that course?
I guess like active participation. I know even when professors have tried to use like Blackboard for discussion post after a reading, some students will wait till the deadline. So that really limits discussion for students that submit their answers earlier. And then I guess with the online and Zoom portion of it, some students can, you know, even if they have their cameras on, they'll be multitasking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, just generally speaking, TBL in an online environment, and I didn't specify synchronous or asynchronous, it can be a challenge. You know, let's say this is an asynchronous course, trying to set up a structure that follows the team-based learning cycle, right? We're going through a cycle each time we meet. That can be really challenging in the asynchronous environment. What about the number of students? Do you think that like the structure that we've done here today would be something that would be feasible with that many students? And I'll get you off the hot seat. How about somebody from Team 8? Someone from Team 8, do you think having 200 students would be feasible for a team-based learning environment?
I mean, I think it would pose as challenges. It's definitely a large class size. We're about like half of that class size today, but I think just depending on how many groups you were to break all the students up into, it could be feasible. But I actually had a question, if I can interject. I wanted to talk about like answer choice 3, the sterile and non-sterile compounding. Our group ranked it number 4, like the least feasible, just based on like the fact that it seems really difficult to make like compounding activities like group-based activities. But just like wanted to ask if you had any additional thoughts about that course.
Irene, I lost you there, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry. So when I last heard you, you had said it would be a challenge. We have about half that here now. And what else did I miss?
Yeah, so I said it would be a challenge. We have like half the participants here now, but my group, I don't think everyone showed up in my group, but it's like we're 4 individuals. I still think if you were to have more groups, you could split up everyone and make it feasible. But like the second thing I had said, like, was I had a question about one of like the answer prompts.
Go for it. I'll pull it back up.
Yeah, so it was the compounding one. So I don't know, is the rank list that you have right now like the overall composition of what everyone selected?
No, I wanted to just show all the responses. I didn't have a clean way to do that other than just screenshotting them.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and share like what my group said. So we put the compounding one as number 4, just based on the fact that it sounds a little challenging to like encourage group-based learning with like compounding. Like that task might be kind of challenging. And I guess I had misinterpreted it. I thought that was like answer choice 3 as like what the majority of people had put. So I was wondering if anyone else had.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. If it makes you feel better, I think the majority of people, the majority of people put the abilities course as last. And,
okay.
And you make a great point. It's a skills-based course, right? And so you have to individually be able to demonstrate those skills. And so I absolutely agree. I think that's probably the least appropriate option to use TBL for. Back to the comment about the number of students. One of the benefits of TBL is that can be used for larger groups of students, 200 or more. And part of that is because when you go into your teams, everyone ideally is involved with that. And, certainly there will be team dynamics that aren't as good as others, but, you're involving each individual within their team. And so the number of teams, as it grows, it can become more complicated, but it certainly is feasible. And I know several programs that use TBL, and one of the primary reasons is that they can involve everyone, even with class sizes of 100, 200 students. Awesome. And let me pull up my screen here, make sure there wasn't anything else I wanted to point out. I think the only other thing I'll mention is, one of these courses is 8 weeks long. The others are 16 weeks. With an 8-week course, it can be hard to kind of build that good team dynamic in such a short time frame. And so that's certainly a consideration as well that we might think about. Okay, excellent. Good job with this. Just to kind of recap and put a bow on it. I do think the PK course is probably best set up to be transformed to TBL. I also think that that the cardiovascular anatomy and physiology and pharmacology is probably second best. And I think it would be a great way to take it from just lectures to making it more active learning and helping students really apply it. And then after that are the medical marijuana and abilities lab courses. All right, so let's go on to the next question. So this was the pros and cons questions. I've kind of sifted through various teams, and I'm going to call on some to maybe elaborate a little bit on their comments, so that way we can hear from folks. So we'll start with the pros. And team 12, I noticed that you all commented on engagement, and so I wanted to ask if you all would share a little bit more about why you selected that as a pro.
I can talk about that a little bit. So, and the rest of my team, feel free to chime in, because we all liked this for a pro. But like you had said, in those larger lectures where you have maybe like 100, 200, 300, like however many students, and you break people down into teams, that makes everyone in the team involved. And so you can really get students engaged in learning when they may be, beforehand would never speak in a class or never have discussions with their peers about the class. So putting people into these smaller groups really forces them, especially with the IRATs and TRATs, to discuss what they're learning.
Amanda, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's one of the reasons why I like TBL so much, is that it does engage every learner. Certainly learners can, if they're not motivated to contribute, they're not going to. That's a different story. But by and large, I found that TBL engages the most number of learners and to the greatest extent of many of the active learning strategies that I've seen. So I appreciate you commenting on that, Amanda. And I want to piggyback off of that. And, you talked about involving each individual within the team. And I actually think this segues nicely into Team 5's comment, which was a con that talked about stronger learners compared to weaker learners. Could I have someone from Team 5 maybe comment on that?
All right, so I'm from Team 5. Yeah, so we were thinking that often in a team, because the team is all working towards one goal and everybody might be coming from different places, like from, lower or higher places. And in the end, they're all to that goal. But, the stronger learner isn't necessarily going to go as far as the person who started lower down. Often in a team, you'll have some students who just got it a lot more or, reviewed or prepared more, and they end up teaching or really supporting the weaker learners, which is good for them to, teaching other people helps reinforce the information, but they don't necessarily gain as much.
You pulled out so many great concepts there. So you're right that there are going to be some learners that find it harder and some that are going to find it easier and less stimulating. That's part of that is on the instructor to create activities that are rigorous and equally challenging, or at least challenging for the majority of students. I love that you pointed out that there is benefit to helping some of those not as strong learners grow. And again, this gets back to some of those intangibles that TBL really promotes. And really, what you're describing is developing leadership skills and teaching skills and inclusiveness and things like that. So I saw your con as a positive, actually. But I do agree that as an instructor, we have to be careful about not creating exercises that are too easy, because then folks are bored and it doesn't really push you. Awesome. Team 10, you commented on diversity. I'd love for you to expand on that.
Yeah, I can speak to that, I think. I think that what we were going for there is more sort of diversity of opinion. I think it's pretty easy when you're working on projects and that to sort of have one person dominate the conversation. And a big part of group projects is just like you get these different opinions that come into play that, it may be from somebody else's real world experience that's different than yours. But they sort of approach the problem from a different angle that you may not have. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Travis, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think, honestly, I think you can take it a step further, even taking a step back from, academics and knowledge and things like that. I think there's even a benefit from a cultural standpoint and being exposed to people of, different race, ethnicity, and all of that. And to give an example, there are some schools of pharmacy and schools of medicine who have very intentionally incorporated TBL because it forces students to be exposed to other students in a close environment. It's not just like we have in the workshop today where you're seeing these people for a day and that's it. They're following them for a year in the same team. And they're looking at various aspects of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so I think that's certainly a pro to TBL, especially during these times. So thanks for commenting on that. It was great. All right, let's move on to a couple more of the cons. Team 6, you talked about the lack of formal instruction. I would love to hear more about this. And some of my former students are on this call and in the TBL team. So I'm sure they're sweating, hoping I don't call on them. But someone from Team 6, if you would comment on the formal instruction con that you all provided.
Yeah, I can talk about it. Really what we were going for here was just the fact that there's some students who just need formal instruction to understand things. And so this form of trying to have them teach themselves before coming to class and then maybe not understanding it and having to learn it from the group as a formal presentation may just set a lot of students behind, because if they really truly learn best from formal instruction, they're going to be starting off weaker than the rest of the group. And if there's not someone who can sit down and explain the concepts to them, they're really going to go through the entire activity not understanding what's going on, and at the end of it probably not gain much from it if their really truest form of education is formal instruction, they might not gain anything from this. It might actually hurt them.
And when you say formal instruction, what do you mean? Are you just referring to like lectures or like?
Yeah, like having someone just stand and explain everything step by step to them if they are unable to learn it on their own.
Anyone else from the other teams want to comment? Agree, disagree?
I actually agree. I think we have people that learn in all different ways. And so if you do like pre-readings and someone's not that type of learner, like say they're more an auditory learner, and you just give them like a piece of paper to read, then they're not going to do, I think, as well as other types of learners. So I think it really depends on the learner's style. And that can, like Marissa was saying, really hinder some learners as far as what they're able to understand. And then coming to a group setting where you have to like discuss with your teammates and feeling like you don't even understand the basic concepts can be really intimidating and sort of set people back. So I completely agree with that.
Does anyone disagree? So let me ask this. Does the pre-class material have to just be a reading? It doesn't. So I did that. And so maybe that's a fault on my part because I was trying to keep it brief, but pre-class material could be a lecture. It could be a video. It could be something from Khan Academy. It could be any number of things. I will tell you that in my course, which is a pharmacotherapy course for cardiology, pre-class materials consist of outlines, journal articles, Khan Academy videos, YouTube videos, and lectures. And so I need to correct one thing, and that's this notion that there's a kind of a single best learning style. And that's really not true. We have learning preferences. We might prefer one thing over the other. But what the evidence in the literature really shows is that students learn best from kind of a multimedia approach. So maybe it's a reading plus a video, et cetera. And so I will disagree a little bit because I actually think TBL is a very formal way to instruct. It's a very structured process. And it doesn't have to just include readings. Those pre-class materials can be whatever you make it. Any other thoughts or comments about the formal instruction? I love that was brought up. All right. Team 8, you commented on cooks in the kitchen. Could you elaborate a little bit?
So we said cooks in the kitchen as one of the cons because depending on like the size of the group, let's say like group of 10, you may have too many people who are strongly really involved in solving the case, dealing with the problem. Then you may have some that are just sitting in the corner, kind of just like watching things happen. And that is something that has personally happened in my group when I had a group of 10. But then once we split into like at the University of Maryland, we did groups X and Y. When we split into that, then we had more participation in that. So I guess one of the cons is depending on really the size of the group, you may have too many people involved and kind of like sometimes maybe even butt heads just because of different personalities. And then you may just have some who really just want to like, oh, like these people, they know what they're doing. They know how to answer. They have the answers. Let me let them do all the work.
Yeah, so Clinton, a couple thoughts. Let me ask you this. You're a resident and you're a resident, you've had prior experiences on APPEs and in pharmacy school, and now as a resident. Has there like throughout your year, have you had like no conflict? It's been a conflict-free year.
In terms like in groups?
I just mean in general. It could be on rounds. It could be with your co-residents. It could be anything.
So far not with co-residents, but when I did my APPEs, when there was always someone who always took the lead and kind of didn't let anyone partake, and it was always their decision over others. So I did always have conflict when I was in a group at
Yes.
some point.
And okay, so you've described one example of conflict, and what I'm really getting at it, and probably not doing a good job of asking it, is conflict is part of our life, right? We're always going to have to interact with people, and so instilling conflict resolution within the curriculum and within pharmacy education is not a bad thing. I get that it can be frustrating at times for students, but it might not be a bad thing necessarily because it's very real life. Now, what might need to happen is that if it gets out of hand, an instructor kind of intervenes and helps the team walk through some of their frustration. But a lot of what you're getting at is that interpersonal skill component that TBL really forces you to confront. But I do appreciate you sharing, because the frustrations that you're describing are absolutely how some of our students feel. Absolutely. One other comment I'll make, Clinton, you made a good point that, teams of 10 and you can have just too many people there, too many personalities, etc. This is why kind of the groups of 5 to 7 is important. When you get above that, it gets really hard to distribute workload in an equitable fashion. And so, for example, in my course, I do teams of 6 plus, or usually 5 plus or minus 1. And so that really keeps the numbers at a manageable state. Awesome. Well, we could spend the rest of the time talking about pros and cons. I wanted to highlight just a few that I thought were interesting. And we'll head on to the last portion or the last activity that you all did, which was improving the 4S activity. And so I've highlighted teams 2 and 5 here to share some. And so team 2, if you could just kind of recap what you all wanted to do with this activity and describe why you all chose what you did.
This is team 2. Are you scrolling to our answers right now?
I'm
Because that might
scrolling
help
to your
jog our
answers.
memory. Okay.
I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try and zoom into it. It's over here. I apologize that it looks kind of not clean.
So we can kind of restructure it just in the order of kind of from the beginning of the activity. So we thought it would be useful if the activity was more formally divided than in just 50-minute chunks of work on these 4 programs or 4 cases, maybe chat with your neighbor, and then 50 minutes of more didactic instruction and individual debrief. We thought it would be more effective if the time was more formally structured into everybody working on a single case as an individual, kind of that think, pair, share format, then discussing it with a neighbor, and then calling on either volunteers from the class to share their answers or their group or partner answer, or even better, using Poll Everywhere or some other sort of interactive software so everybody's voice could be heard. This could also help the instructor further tailor debrief sessions if they saw that students were not successful in mastering a certain concept or identifying something. For the QT prolonging drug-drug interactions, we thought it would be more clinically impactful if the students were asked to rank the significance of the interactions as they saw or something in that nature, just to further apply the material, because as pharmacists, we know that QT prolonging interactions are dissimilar from one another. And I think that's really what that called upon what we said. Essentially, we thought that 2-hour block could be better utilized, and by breaking it up into different chunks of individual thought, sharing with a partner, and then group discussion and repeating, it would also help keep the class more engaged during such a long session by keeping everyone on the same pace, but also a variety of activities within that hour and just rotating through.
Mm-hmm. So many good points you brought up, Emily. Your all's team did a really good job of thinking through this, and that's why I called on you all. I love that you mentioned splitting up the cases. And honestly, this is something that even today I realized I could have done differently. We could have gone back and forth between the breakout rooms and each application exercise, as opposed to doing all 3 at once. That way you're engaging people kind of on the continuum. Whereas by like 9:35, folks were in the main room and just, they're hanging out for 10 minutes. So that absolutely, I think that could be a better use of folks' time. I think of all the things that you talked about, what I like the most is that you use the rank order as an example. This is a great way of having them take their thought process a step further. Sure, QT prolonging drugs, they matter, but not all of them matter as much as others. And so having them really discern, okay, this is a level 1 criticality. I have to intervene on this versus say a level 4, maybe we're just monitoring or do nothing. And so having them think through that can be really powerful. Awesome. Great job. Great job with that, team 2. The other team I was going to call on was team 5. So let me find team 5's answer and let you all share. Again, I apologize for how the responses are coming across on your all's end. It's just the reality of doing this through Zoom. All right, yeah, team 5. Anyone from team 5 want to take a stab at it?
I can speak for team 5. So the first part we were talking about was providing specific choices. The way the case was worded, it sounded like students were just to come up with a plan pretty much on their own. We thought it might be helpful to either have multiple choice or some sort of specific requirement for exactly what's required in the plan, like you know, how many interventions should be made or what are the most important interventions that should be made. And then we also agreed that the simultaneous report element of the 4 S's wasn't really there, since it seemed like the instructor was just going to go through at the end with all the different groups, and essentially, like, once you hear someone else's answer, a group would change their answer, modify their answer, etc. Those are the biggest things that we identified.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the specific choices recommendation is great. The more specific we can be in our instructions, the more guidance we give, the more clarity there is, and the more likely the students are to perform in a way that we're expecting or asking. So those are all great points. Thanks for sharing, Evan. Any other teams want to comment on the 4S activity and how to make it more like a 4S activity? So I do want to point out, you know, team-based learning, very structured. You need to include all of the elements. It's not just working in a team. It's truly a structured process. But that's not the best format for everyone and for every course. The 4S kind of motto or mindset, if you will, for the case-based activities is something, though, that can be extrapolated to a number of active learning strategies. And so I would encourage you, even if you don't use TBL, keep the 4S in mind, because those 4 S's, they're really just about crafting good application exercises, not even as much about TBL specifically. So I wanted to leave the next few minutes for any questions that folks might have. I do just want to recap a couple of things so that we're all clear. So, you know, we did kind of a mock TBL session today, and I put you all in teams kind of last minute, and we worked through some IT related issues as it came or as we went through the process. When we're doing this in the actual classroom setting, all of this stuff is really done ahead of time, and so that it flows much more smoothly. So do keep that in mind. There are aspects of today that we really just couldn't mimic the actual classroom experience. And so with that, we've kind of gone through all the elements of TBL. That is most of what I have, but I want to open it up for any questions that you all have. Could be about TBL, could be about how to apply it. Maybe you're like, hey, I only precept students on rotation. Is this even applicable to me? We can have a conversation about that too. So yeah, I'll open it up. Feel free to unmute yourself and we'll go from there.
I definitely wanted to ask a team-based question. In the fall semester, I'll be assisting with teaching a course where we do have students all in teams, and they remain in the teams throughout the entire semester. It's kind of a service learning course that's interprofessional. However, we're going to have a group of students join from a university in Europe, and they'll be joining via Zoom. The rest of our Maryland-based students will be in person. The course is going to, like the way we've mapped out our 3 hours of course time is that we're gonna kind of start with like a community talk lectures type thing in the first hour, and then we'll move into different screenings that we offer to community members. But for me, the challenge is thinking about how to incorporate, how to do it in the hybrid model where some people are in person, some people are online. And then it just seems like the online team members are just going to be at a disadvantage. They'll have to interact with the community members via another student's laptop. As course faculty, we won't be able to have like one faculty member per team, at least we don't think so. So like ensuring that the people who are joining online aren't just sitting there like watching and actually actively participating. These seem like problems to me that I don't have great answers to. So I just wanted to get ideas and sort of hear what you all have to say.
Yeah. So Merton, I have a few thoughts. I'll start by saying I think a longer conversation offline might be of greater value. So we can talk about some of the nuances. One of your concerns is the hybrid model. Hybrid is really hard to do TBL in because you're just, you should see us behind the scenes, like moving things, like it works so much smoother in person TBL. But to do both in person and online or through Zoom would just be, I think, more challenge than you'd be able to overcome by yourself. I would pose, can you just do it all through Zoom and use breakout rooms that way? So that way the people here in the US can interact with the people in Europe over, a long period of time. And then, the other part is I don't know what the content is like in the course. And so it's difficult to really comment on how much of that could be pre-class versus in-class material and what would the application activities look like. So those are some of the things that I come through my mind that we could maybe talk through. Feel free to shoot me an email and we can meet and discuss.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Hey, Zach, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I think one of the, let's say, quote unquote, downfalls of like group activities in general is this idea of groupthink. Like not everybody's like voice is being heard, and usually like what I worry about is like students who are more on the quieter side. Like you can't really assess if you know how well they're doing, etc. And so I wanted to ask like what methods do you take to kind of prevent like having students fall through the cracks and end up finding out during like a final exam or a formal assessment that shoot, this student was struggling. Any ideas or methods that you've used in the past?
It's such a good question, Cecilia. So a couple thoughts. One, the biggest, or I should say the best predictor of performance in the course is the IRAT. And the IRAT is more or less a way for me as an instructor to identify at-risk students. And I can go back in my course from last year and tell you exactly which students were likely to do poorly at the end of the course based on their IRAT performance. It was the strongest predictor of their final exam grade. The second component, Cecilia, that I'd say is peer evaluation is very powerful. And how you structure your evaluation can make it such that the peers are providing constructive feedback to maybe someone who's not contributing as much or a weaker student. And so, for example, in my course, when I do the peer evaluation, I have students assign a score to each student. They have 40 points. They have to distribute the points across all their team members. And that forces their peers to really rank them. And if they rank them low, they have to explain why. Well, listen, I only gave you an 8 because you don't talk much during the application activities, or you don't really contribute your thoughts. And then I asked them to provide a constructive kind of feed forward comment. In the future, could you do more X, Y, and Z? I'm able to see those comments, Cecilia, and it allows me to kind of see, okay, who's struggling, who is just like not even there. Like maybe their Zoom camera is off, their computer's on, but that's it, no one's home. And so you're able to intervene that way for some of those students. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you'll reach out like preemptively to those students. Gotcha.
Yeah, I had a number of measures that were essentially triggers for me to shoot an email to a student and say, hey, I noticed you're a little behind on things. Like, is everything okay? What can I do to help you? Just a quick email like that goes a really long ways, but the setup of TBL you've got a lot of data points that you can collect and assess that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any other questions?
A question. So you mentioned about like perceptive.
Yeah.
So how do we apply this to a one-on-one, perceptive versus with a student?
Yeah, I was waiting for it. I almost made this one of the rank order options, but I couldn't figure out a good way to word it. So I will tell you that if I could use medicine as an example, in medicine, when they do their kind of clerkship, the last 2 years of med school, there's kind of groups of students that might have a focus or an emphasis where let's say they want to do psych and they spend more time doing psych rotations or cardiology or whatever. They will actually kind of pull those students. They have their experiences, right? They're still on rotation, but throughout the rotation, they have scheduled topics, and those topics are done in a TBL fashion. They have their pre-readings, maybe it's journal articles, guidelines, etc. They come together, they do the RAT process, then they do application activities, and they debrief. And so I would say the use of this in the experiential setting, one, it has to be with other learners, right? Let's say you're at a clinical track program, maybe it's Hopkins, Maryland, wherever, and you've got 10 or 20 students with you at any given time. You could take your topic discussions and use TBL for your topic discussions. And it might actually be less effort for the preceptors in the long run, because you create your activities once and you just have students go through it each time they rotate through clinical track, as opposed to giving a 2-hour chalk talk or something like that. Does that help, Elizabeth?
Sure, gives me some ideas that we can take back. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you only have one learner at a time, obviously TBL isn't something that's going to jive. But if you've got a group of learners, you can really pull resources and make it a powerful learning tool that way.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's been great. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming, and I also want to thank you for kind of dealing with some of the IT stuff that came with doing this on Zoom. I appreciate everyone's great participation, especially those who are tuning in from work or verifying orders or whatever you may be doing. I just want to let you know that I appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. I'd be happy to talk about this further with you. So Jim, I'll hand it back to you.
Yes, Zach, thank you very much for that fantastic presentation. Really a fantastic example of active learning and peer teaching. So, thank you again. We're going to go ahead and take a little break here. So we'll reconvene according to the schedule at 10:45. So you can go ahead and take your stretch break, grab a snack, whatever you'd like to do, and we will be back with my presentation